Next we have Howard Dresner, who is also an industry analyst with Dresner Advisory Systems. He's going to be walking us through some of his impressions with Tableau itself, with other new products that have come on. Howard, thanks so much for joining us.
How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing good.
Thanks for having me.
So how are you enjoying the conference so far?
Very well. You know, managing through the crowds. You know, it's the first one of these I attended. I think there were 700 people.
Wow, yeah, it's a different thing now.
Very different feel.
Cool, so as an analyst, always on the lookout for new technologies and things that impact stuff?
You have to be, right? You have
Absolutely.
to have your ear to the ground, paying attention to what's going on out there. And certainly as a smaller organization, we're a relatively small boutique analyst firm, if you will.
Okay.
I think we're pretty well connected to what's going on. It's been just an explosion of innovation in the marketplace. I've been covering this market going on 30 years now.
Oh my gosh.
Long time.
That's a lot of change.
And it's come a long way since the early days. I mean, back in the 80s, it wasn't called business intelligence back then. It was called management information systems,
Right.
And then there were executive information systems and decision support systems, and it was really relegated to the guys in the white coats, you know, in the glass rooms with the mainframe computers.
Yep.
And so the revolution over the course of the last few years has really about been empowering users and sort of disintermediation away from IT and from the so-called experts to get it into the hands of the people that are actually probably in the best position to do something with it.
Totally. And in that time, I mean, the iteration cycles of technology are just speeding up so much faster. It must be much more challenging to do your job today than it was 20 years ago, right?
Well, you're right. The new software versions, I mean, back in the day, new software would come out every couple of years.
Right. You get a few months to check it out.
Plenty of time to digest it. But now it's really 6 months, not constant and rolling updates,
right?
To software. So it's and of course lots of new vendors that have come to the fore that didn't exist even a few years ago.
Absolutely.
So tremendous amounts of innovation. But you're right, the rate of that innovation has increased dramatically, which is exciting, right? It's an exciting time to be in this marketplace to see all of this change going on.
Totally. So as somebody who does this and has to stay abreast and has to keep up on these things, what are some tips you can give us to all of us that are struggling, just trying to even tread water in this space?
You got to read a lot.
Yep.
And you have to talk to a lot of people, and you have to come to events like this, and it's great to talk to the vendors. You want to talk to the users to understand what they're doing.
Right.
But you develop your own sort of network of people, and you get people calling you and say, "Hey, did you see this?" I'm like, no.
I guess I should.
So I mean, it's just a matter of that. And I'm obviously always online, always getting alerts about what's going on in the industry.
Sure.
So through as many mechanisms as I can, I'm staying abreast of what's going on in the market at any particular point in time.
Cool. And what are some of your other favorite conferences that you attend that you find really good networking opportunities, good interactions?
Well, I always go back to, I was with Gartner for 13 years.
Cool.
And while I was there, I formed their whole BI conference series. And I still go back. They still are gracious enough to invite me back every year. And that's a great conference because you're dealing with people that are coming there expressly to learn about business intelligence and analytics and big data. And so there are always some great conversations that ensue.
Right.
That's one. Of course, I go to lots of user group conferences like this one. I'll be. This is the season for them, so
Totally.
I'll be on the road really, pretty much now through through November.
Absolutely.
Going to the various trade shows. But this one, of course, is a great one, simply because it's lots of end users.
Yep.
And I love to talk to IT. Don't get me wrong. They have a very different perspective on the world, but it's the users that are actually trying to solve actual problems for the business that, to me, is so interesting and so engaging.
Totally, and I understand a lot of the sessions are driven by the end users as well. They're kind of saying how they're using the product and, and so on and so forth. Have you had any good ones that you could recommend
No,
for us?
you know what, I haven't gotten enough user sessions. They've had us in an analyst track. But I like going down to the show floor or, if you can, during breaks, to actually collar someone and ask them what they're doing, what they're thinking.
Yep.
And talk about some of the challenges that they're facing in their businesses and how they're solving them.
Cool. So what are some of the overall arching trends you're seeing in technology with everything it seems like there's so many spaces. I know we all can't be experts on all of them.
Where to begin? Of course, everyone's beating the big data drum. We're going to come out with our big data report next month, which is interesting. There are some interesting use cases out there that are fascinating, like smart cities and meteorological applications.
Cool.
Of course, IoT eventually, as it comes to the fore, will be very interesting. It's still early days. So there are some great use cases out there for big data, for IoT. But even more pressing than that, mobility, of course. We've been tracking mobility for 8 years now.
Sure.
And so it's really become much more mainstream.
Yep.
Cloud adoption, we've been tracking that for a number of years as well. Collaborative capabilities, things like storytelling is part of collaborative. That's also heating up in the marketplace. End user data preparation, so data wrangling, as some would call it. That's on fire. That's a real pressing need. I mean, heretofore people would have used Excel to tackle that problem, and Excel is not the best tool for data wrangling, or what we call end user data prep. Also location intelligence. And especially when you look at IoT, what's IoT about? Right? It's about all these sensors out there that are collecting this data and storing this data in big data, if you will. And location and status are the two big things. Like, where are you and what's going on?
Right.
So location is also really important. Governance increasingly is important. So next year we're planning to take a hard look at things like governed data discovery. So there's so much going on right now in the industry from a technological perspective. It's fascinating. It's hard to keep everything under control and keep your arms around it, which is part of the excitement. So even though these are the things we've planned out to cover next year in our research agenda, we know there'll be things that we didn't think about that we're going to end up covering because the market's always changing.
Absolutely. I guess the one good piece of news for the analysts is it seems like the spaces are converging a bit, right? Would you agree with that? Like, if you're doing big data, you kind of need analytics, you kind of need cloud computing.
Well, we think so. And we look at IoT in particular. We talk about IoT from a business intelligence and analytics perspective.
Yep.
And the things you have to think about, big data is part of that. So, big data is the reason you do, or IoT is the reason you do big data.
Right.
All right, so location's part of that, end user data prep is part of that, advanced and predictive analytics is part of that, and I also put cloud in that category.
Yep.
And I know a lot of folks that are doing big data today, it's on premises, but in the future I think it's really going to be in the cloud. And especially when you look at IoT and all the sensor data, that's going to live in the cloud. And so that increasingly, that's where we're going to do the analysis. So that's a big part of those things coming together at different rates, right? It doesn't happen all at once.
Absolutely.
But you're right, there is convergence. Same thing, the whole notion of those people that have historically been preparing the data versus those people that consume the data coming together as well.
Right.
Because the users are probably in the best position to know how they want the data formatted, what that model ought to look like before they do the analysis. Now, it might be a business analyst that does that, but it's probably not going to be a technical role or a centralized IT person. And same thing with the people that create the reports and the dashboards and those that consume them. Increasingly, those roles are coming together too.
Yep.
So the creators and the consumers increasingly will be a same role or a single role.
Absolutely.
So convergence is good.
Yeah, and another nice thing is because there is so many new products coming at you, it would seem like your guys' services are in more demand.
Well, yes.
That's cool?
It's been an exciting time. I mean, I've been doing what I'm doing now for going on 9 years.
Cool.
So after I decided to go off and do my own thing. And it's been, it started off, early days. I was, publishing books and doing the speaking circuit. Mm-hmm. And then I decided in 2010 to go back and be an analyst because it's the only thing I was really good at anyway. But it's been really gratifying to see just the interest level and the growth and the awareness. The awareness of data and what data can do and analyzing that data and the value to the organization and even to the individual. I think right now is at its highest point that it's ever been. So, from the early days when I was tracking this, where it was sort of a backroom thing, and you had to know somebody to get data, to where it is today, where you have really everybody that is empowered to take advantage of data and to apply it to their particular role in the organization. So that's been awesome. And from our perspective, it's definitely fueled our growth and will continue to do so moving forward.
Very, very cool. Do you find also that folks are asking you different questions these days than they did 5 or 10 years ago?
Asking different questions. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with some of the overarching trends, like cloud versus on-premises, or should we do big data, or what is big data, or advanced and predictive. A lot of questions around that. It's not as much implementation or deployment as you would expect, but certainly keen interest. People are really interested to understand the story behind the data.
Right.
So that's certainly part of it. But we get asked questions about a whole host of topics, ranging from technology to organizational structure to skills that they need. One of the things that we talk about actually was the subject of my second book was really culture. Had nothing to do with technology whatsoever. you have to deal with the people and the people processes in order to be successful with things like business intelligence. So I often speak about that to audiences as opposed to, what's the coolest technology out there.
Right, and speaking of culture, I love that too, because that comes up. I do a bit of analyst work myself, and especially like when you're talking agile, DevOps sort of stuff, it always comes back to the culture is foundational. It's got to be first.
Yes.
What are some examples of companies you can highlight for us that have really interesting cultural models that?
Well, I think it comes down to having leadership that understands, that really values the notion of data and fact-based analysis and applying those facts to the business.
Yep.
So you have to have visionary leaders. And if you have a visionary leader at the head of the organization, life is a push-down stack, right? So it just ripples through the organization, and it makes it important throughout. There are some great case studies out there. In my last book, I cited Cleveland Clinic as one of my favorite case studies. There are several really good ones in there.
They actually came up just they're actually here, I believe, presenting
as
well.
Are they? So, yeah. Love those guys doing some really amazing things. But their initiatives initially that began down in the sort of the bottom of the organization, at a functional level between medical operations and finance, who realized that they were going into these management meetings with different numbers.
Yeah.
Which is never a good thing, right? When you're presenting to the CEO.
Somebody's lying.
Yeah, right. So they realized that if they got together and they worked together and they shared information and started sharing systems, that they could actually show up in these meetings with information that agreed with each other.
Sense.
And it sort of caught on. And once Toby Cosgrove, the current CEO, took over, he really had a vision for how to use data within the organization.
Okay.
And things just really started to change. And they've literally been able to transform the organization through fact-based analysis, applying facts to the organization. Cool. And being able to improve the care to their patients, being able to cut costs within the organization has been tremendous.
Because they're tracking all those metrics.
Well, it's been transformative to that organization, and as well as other organizations. But it's having that visionary leadership that really is the icing on the cake. I mean, there are a lot of great things that you can do without the benefit of visionary leadership. Yep. Like I was examining, the example I gave, finance and medical ops getting together and saying, hey, there's a better way to do this. Yep. Even IT can play a significant role. They're a great enabler, right? Because very often they have the knowledge around the data. And what IT ought to be doing is, if they're not doing it already, is educating the users, really engaging with the users, and helping them understand the underlying data and how they ought to be using it.
Sure.
And I've done other case studies where IT did drive it. You need an extraordinary leader in IT to do that as well, somebody that's conversant in the business.
Right.
But that's an enabler, right? If you have the enablers, and the influencers, and then you have the leadership, then you have a complete package, and that's what I would consider what I call a performance-directed culture.
Very cool. And what is the name of that, your second book, by the way?
Profiles in Performance.
Profiles in Performance.
Business Intelligence Journeys and the Roadmap of Change.
I am going to be picking that up myself later. Cool. Good stuff. I always love hearing about new companies. Excellent. And if I could just get because being an analyst with your fingers on the pulse, what was your impressions, or what were your impressions of the Visible announcement yesterday?
I've been playing with it.
Cool.
I like it. I like the design, the fact that they really took into consideration how people use mobile devices. So we'll see. I have some data in it. I didn't bring it with me. I won't be doing a demo today.
Yeah, no problem.
But no, I like the fact that it's free. It's a great price.
Yeah.
But I like that they're trying to push it down to the everyday consumer. And also, I was able to just load some of my own data from Amazon into it, which Dave Story had showed me how he had done that. I'm like, that's really interesting, because I buy a lot of stuff from Amazon. Yeah. It'd be really interesting to see where I'm spending my money. But you could apply that to your personal banking and your credit card information, your utility information. It's great to be able to do that. I don't think many of us do that level of analysis in our personal lives, and maybe we should.
Totally. Yeah, and they make it so easy. I mean, it seems like, with all the data that's available to us out there, each one of us could go out and get a much better picture of our lives. Like there's things like Mint, that'll track your money and other stuff like that, but it doesn't.
There are so many things. And then really just from an industry perspective, just the ease of use associated with the tools that are out there in the marketplace today versus even a few years ago, where it really required a lot of training. And I think that's the hard part, right? Making it easy is really hard. It requires very sophisticated technology so that really every person could use it with minimal amounts of training, maybe zero training. I mean, that's the ideal, right? Zero training.
Sure.
Being able to pick it up. And of course, the new generation, the younger people, right? When they pick up a tablet or a phone, it's very intuitive to them. So if I gave it to my 16-year-old, he'd probably instantly get it. Right.
Absolutely. Cool. And when you're out there talking to other customers and talking to folks about Tableau in particular, what are the things that people say, that they really like about the product compared to competitors?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that, but I will say that today I actually delivered their Industry Excellence Award to them.
Okay.
So it's the first time we've done Industry Excellence Awards. They're one of our overall leaders. And so, you know, I don't endorse vendors or products as an analyst, but
sure.
I certainly want to congratulate them on their achievement. Since we started publishing our flagship Wisdom of Crowds Business Intelligence Market Study, they've been a consistent leader, and that's since for 6 years now.
Right.
And so this is the first year we actually, you know, produced the lovely Lucite Awards and delivered one to them today to Elisa Fink.
Very, very cool. And what are the things that you look at when you're giving the awards out?
That's a really good question. It really is voice of the customer.
Okay.
So what we do is we do all primary research. We own the whole entire process. And as the name suggests, of course, we do a fair amount of crowdsourcing. But we also have a community of 3,000 organizations around the world that participate in our research.
Cool.
So we collect data twice a year. And so the vendors get graded really by their customers. They actually get to, for better or worse, get to rank the vendors. And we use a 33 measure system.
Holy cow, which gets pretty intensive.
It is. So we take a look at the sales and acquisition process. We take a look at the value for price paid. We take a look at the technology, of course, probably the most measures for technology.
Right.
Technical support, the consulting services that the vendor offers, the integrity that is perceived by their customers, and whether or not they would recommend the product to somebody else. And we take all of that, we put it into multiple models. 2 of those models are what we use for our Excellence Awards. So one is called the Customer Experience Model.
Okay.
And so they're quadrants. I was a Gartner, so I still think in quadrants.
Sure.
But we take a look at the everyday life on the ground experience that the customers have with the product and with the vendor. So we look on one axis, we look at the technology. On the other axis, we look at all the touch points. So sales, technical support, and consulting services. And so if the confluence of those 2 things, those are our customer experience leaders, and Tableau is one of those. But then we have another quadrant, which is our vendor credibility quadrant.
Got it.
And so vendor credibility really measures the relationship that a vendor has with their customer, how the customer feels about them. Cool. And so we look at the value for price paid on one dimension, and then we look at integrity and the recommend score on the other dimension. And so the upper right, again, those are our vendor credibility leaders. And vendors that are in the upper right are leaders in both of those quadrants are the overall leaders, and Tableau is one of the overall leaders.
Fantastic, very good. Where could somebody go to find this? Is this a report, or is this just data you kept yourself?
Well, which part of the reports get published.
Okay.
And it's an interesting model, so certainly there are some that subscribe to them. But those that are part of our research community, so end users, we love end users to come into the process, and we give them the research for free. Cool. So if they complete our surveys, they get free research.
Fantastic.
But others do license them and buy distribution rights and all that other stuff. And in terms of the awards, we issued a press release last week about the awards. And if you go to our website, DresnerAdvisory.com, you can find everything you needed to know about that.
Fantastic. Howard Dresner, we are out of time.
Hey,
I wish I could go on.
My pleasure.
But thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Take care.